Okay,
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Staff, today is April 17th, 4:03 p.m. Can you proceed with a roll call?
Yes, Chair Podgornkar, absent. Vice Chair Hansen,
Present?
Commissioner Carter,
Present.
Commissioner Yang.
Here.
And Commissioner Fung.
Present.
Okay, so we'd like to get approval of the minutes, or if we'd like to go over the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I move to approve.
Does anyone second?
A second.
Okay. Okay,
Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, roll call vote, Vice Chair Hansen. Approve.
yes,
Commissioner Fung,
Yes.
Commissioner Carter.
Dang.
Staying.
Wasn't there.
And Commissioner Yang.
okay. Do we have any postponements?
No postponements.
Okay, so can we move on to oral communications?
Yes, we have received no oral communications.
Okay, so this portion of the meeting is reserved for anyone wishing to address the commission on any matter within the jurisdiction of the commission, and not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Victoria, are there any attendees waiting to make public comments?
No, no one in the room.
Great, sorry. Okay, so since there's no members of the public present, I'll close public comments if that's okay.
Great.
Okay. Do we have any written communications?
No written communications.
Okay. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, we have a couple staff reports. Would you like to start?
Yes, please.
Sure. I'm Ursula, Environmental Programs and Sustainability Manager, and we are still working on garbage post-collection services agreements to bring to council, possibly still on May 20th.
Okay.
That is the update on that.
I'm going to talk about the CEC approval going into effect.
Sure. As you may remember, in the end of last year, council approved a REACH code for new buildings, right? It was a pivot after the Berkeley ruling, and it requires increased building efficiency for new buildings.
Yes.
And that was approved by council, but then it had to be approved by the California Energy Commission and the CBSC, and that just happened last week. We finally got our final
Excellent.
approval, so now we can actually enforce that through our building permit department.
Wonderful. That's good. Okay.
And then other smaller updates, the compost site just opened for the summer. So it's open Friday and Saturday. We did have a successful, or it's next weekend is our environmental recycling day.
Ooh, don't have that handy.
Next weekend, I believe, is our environmental recycling day at De Anza College from 8 to 12. And you are all up to date with our events that we're tabling at. So thank you for your participation with that.
If I may ask, how many people showed up to the Earth Day event? That was such a great turnout.
I don't know for the total event. We didn't do drone photos and estimates this year. But I know for our booth, we had 42 virtual reality participants and 210 survey responses.
That's great.
So thank you.
Awesome.
I believe that concludes staff updates.
Okay, great. Are there
Commissioner updates?
any commissioner updates? I think I went to Earth Day and it was really fun. I think all the commissioners showed up, so we were all there at different times and it was really fun. I saw many former students, some who I didn't recognize, so that was quite fun.
Great.
Okay. Jeff, do you have any updates? Anybody? Okay, no more commissioner updates. All right, is there any old business?
No old business.
Okay, so we'll proceed to item number 2. Chair and vice chair elections. Do we have a presentation?
Just a brief one. So this is an exact repeat from last year. I just want to go over why we're doing this. It's required that we elect a new chair and vice chair once a year. Your term is until the end of January 30th. What are the responsibilities of the chair is to facilitate the commission meetings, work with the liaison, and present the commission updates at the mayor's commission meeting the second Wednesday every other month. They rotate between in-person and virtual. And then the role of the vice chair is to support the chair if they are absent. So if you want to go into questions and discussions, the order of operations is to make nominations. You can nominate yourself or another member on the commission, and then you can accept or decline the nomination, and then someone will make a motion to elect the chair and vice chair.
Okay, are there any clarifying questions from the commissioners? Any questions about it? Good. Okay, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
No members of the public present.
Okay, can we move on commission discussion? Does anyone? Oh wait,
Yes, you're doing great.
does anybody want to suggest wording, or does anybody want to make any nominations?
Can I nominate you as chair?
Yeah, I'm so good at this. Sorry. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I accept.
Okay, and any nominations for vice chair?
Nominate alternate vice chair. That's okay.
It's, yeah, I don't blame mine. And I accept, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
And then you have to make a formal motion.
somebody want to make a formal motion?
Okay.
It will be weird for me to make a
Oh.
motion, I think, because.
Oh, because it's one action, right? And it's weird for you and I to make a.
You can make a motion. You can absolutely make a motion. Do you want me to pull up wording? It's pretty simple.
Try, want to do it?
Okay, I motion that we to vote for the chair and vice chair of the commission.
I'll pull up some suggested wording for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you would say, I move to, sorry, I don't actually have the wording up. I move to nominate Susan Hansen as our chair and Alex Fung as our vice chair of Sustainability Commission in 2025. You have to repeat that.
Flip your name card, please.
Oh,
Alexander.
That's one of the why I did not say anything.
That's okay.
Okay. You're dealing with the person who has the least brain fright today. I move that we vote for Alexander Funk as the vice chair and Susan Hansen as chair of the Sustainability Commission.
Okay, is there a second for the motion? A second. Okay. Can we do a roll call vote for the motion?
Yes. Chair Hansen,
Aye.
Commissioner Fung, or sorry, Vice Chair Fung, Commissioner Yang, and Commissioner Carter.
Aye.
And Commissioner Padwankar absent. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to move on to the next item, we have a guest speaker on Zoom.
Okay, so item number 3, is that the capital improvement? No, item number 2, right? Item number 3. Item number 3, fiscal year 2025 capital improvement programs and a 5-year plan. That one?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have staff member Susan Michael on Zoom to give the presentation.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm not in the room with you today. I'm the CIP manager, Susan Michael, CIP manager, and in the room is Director Chad Mosley. He's the Director of Public Works, and he's there to support if we have any additional questions. So I have a short deck I'm going to go through, and then we can have questions at the end. So hopefully you can see my screen okay.
Yes.
Great. Get all my windows in order. So this afternoon, we are here to just bring you up to date on the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 2025-26, and the 5-year plan that comes along with it. So the action is simply to receive the presentation and provide input if you wish. There's nothing that's required, so you don't have to take a vote on anything. If you wish to support, we welcome that as well, whatever input that you'd like to receive or provide, and whatever format that needs to be in, but we'll get there later. This is a good time to mention that this year, when the city updated the web pages that we have, we added some content to the CIP webpage. You can see the blue tabs. There's lists of some of our projects, the major projects that are underway, the dashboard that shows a little bit of information on all the CIP projects, the link to Engage Cupertino, which we've used for some of our projects for public input, the past year CIP books, and the new tab really is the other resources at the bottom. And it gives you a link to things like the Parks and Rec System Master Plan and other things that we've referenced in developing the CIP. So it's a great resource. So tonight we'll go through the achievements of the last year, the existing CIP projects, a little bit of update on those, what we're proposing for fiscal year 2025-26 and the 5-year plan, and then some short mention of what the next steps are. So our achievements for the last year. We completed a couple projects. We did work on the McClellan Road, Dianza, and Pacifica intersection. This was part of the McClellan Road Bikeway project. And we actually added we improved pedestrian and bike access, and actually vehicular accessibility at this intersection as well. We also did some repairs to the Vi Avenue storm drain outfall. Outfall is the last portion of a storm drain before it drains into a creek. So some of our outfalls are in bad shape. We did the state of this outfall was brought to our attention, and so we did a quick repair on it. It's still an active project because we do need to replace the outfall, but that's an environmental permitting endeavor, and that will be ongoing for a little while, and we're trying to work with Valley Water to have that happen. We also completed restriping of Dianza for improved buffered bike lanes. You can see those. And we did work out of the Blackberry Farm pools. We replastered the pools. We also upgraded some of the accessibility features of the site. And one project that's nearly complete is the all-inclusive playground at Jollyman Park. It's looking great, and we tentatively have a grand opening for June 10th. So mark your calendars. It's going to be great. It looks really good. And so a little bit of information on the existing CIP program. We've got 28 active projects. So some of these projects, so like the color coding is just it helps to see what types of projects. So the blue projects are bike ped transportation projects. And like 3 of these are Tommy and Inu, the trail. There's 9 projects total, but 3 of them are Stevens Creek Boulevard Bikeway and 3 of them are Tommy and Inu. So we have to do that in order to keep the accounting clear. So there's facilities projects, parks projects, infrastructure, basically streets and infrastructure projects, and the bike ped projects. And then we added a new category this year, which is sustainability, which is very exciting. The projects are being broken to these different types simply to facilitate seeing where our energy and time is going. But it doesn't have a fiscal impact, but we did think that it was worth adding this category of sustainability projects just because it does reflect our values as a city, that we are trying to push forward with our climate action plan and doing more sustainable projects. So 3 of the projects that were, for the most part, previously in facilities are now in sustainability. So the EV charging station expansion at the service center, the photovoltaic systems project, and the Silicon Valley Hopper. It's our shuttle service, the EV parking that we're trying to implement for that. So those are the 3 projects that are already underway. All right. And so the fiscal year 25-26 CIP and the 5-year plan. Wanted to mention how we develop or how we prioritize projects. Typically, CIP projects, capital improvement projects, are repairs and improvements to our existing assets, the things that we capitalize, and those are things like facilities and whatnot. And so it is, our first priority is always going to be the projects or the things that need doing because it protects the public health and safety. So health and safety is always our first priority. We also then take in feedback from the council, commission, and community input. We have also consulted with the master plans and the general plans that are in place, like the climate action plan, the Parks and Rec system master plan, and other master plans like that storm drain master plan. And then we also can take into consideration projects that are already underway. There might be a phase 2, like the Stevens Creek Boulevard bikeway project. Phase 1 was already done. We're now working on phase 2. And we also, when we're considering our projects, need to be fiscally responsible. What money do we have? And what staff do we have to do the projects, as well as other resources? So this year, we're proposing, these are the new projects. There's 1 new project and 2 projects that we are asking for, 2 existing projects that we're asking for additional funding on. The first project is our storm drain outfall repairs. So we had the major problem with an outfall under Stevens Creek Boulevard last year where it meets Calabasas Creek. And then the Vi Avenue outfall came to our attention. So Public Works realized that we needed to do a survey of all of our outfalls. So we did had a report done. And that report came back and said there were 51 outfalls that need significant repairs. And so we are asking for funding to address the 3 most critical outfalls. And it's expensive, as you can imagine, because we do get into environmental permitting things. And sometimes just access to the outfalls is difficult. So the other 2 projects we're asking for funding for are the ADA improvements. So every year we are making improvements to accessibility in our city. That is a federal mandate, and we are continuing to chip away at that wherever we can. And the facilities condition assessment implementation. So a couple of years ago, we had reports done that surveyed the condition of our facilities. And I believe it's well known that we have a number of things on our facilities that need work. For the funding for the coming year that we're looking for, we're needing to replace 5 fire alarm systems in 5 different buildings. And we're also looking to replace 3 different roofs, flat roofs. Sports Center, Quinlan, and Senior Center all have flat roof that we need to do work on. So that's where the money is being spent. So this is that same information in a table form to show that the cost, the 950, 110, and 940 is $2 million. $2 million is the number that our finance department realized that we can afford to budget $2 million each year for the CIP for the next coming years. So we're trying to stay within that budget. It's a back to the basics. These are not really thrilling projects, but they're very important projects. And we are trying to work on our infrastructure. These are critical projects for us, so we're trying to put those at the forefront. And the 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan also reflects us back to the basics. We're trying to stay within our $2 million budget every year. And I'll get into a little bit about that, but we will ask to continue to fund the ADA improvements that we do throughout the city. And we also will ask to continue to fund improvements to our facilities that are need done. Then year 2 is a slightly larger number because we hope to replace the fire alarm system at the library, and that in itself is a 1.3 or $1.5 million project. So that year we'll have to either find funding or see how this proposal will work within the city's fiscal means. We also hope to continue funding projects for the outfalls because there are so many that are in critical condition. So those are the things that are going to keep us busy in the coming years. We also did do the study that shows that the Blackberry Farm Golf Course irrigation needs replacement, and we received direction to keep that to minor, repairs as much as we can. But even that is still a major project, and for staffing reasons, more than anything else, we're looking to do that in year 4. So it's worth noting that there's more information in your packet on projects that aren't funded right now in sustainability, and that like electrification of buildings, for example, but that we are hoping to get more information on what those projects scope and cost might be so that we can work them into a 5-year plan more effectively. And I will say that Tori and Ursula are definitely working on that. And it's a great development, I think, for us to have that capability and focus. And so the next steps for us, we're going to all the commissions this week, and I have one more meeting where I'm going to the Planning Commission next week. The CIP every year goes to the Planning Commission, and the reason is to review the proposal for conformance with the general plan. So it's pretty straightforward in theory, but it's always a good discussion. And then we're going to go, the CIP then generally will become part of the budget discussions that happen in May and June. When we did go to council a couple weeks ago now, the council did ask us to return on May 6th to review some projects for defunding. And in your packets under the I think it's attachment A, you can see that each project that is active, at least tonight we're just talking about the sustainability projects, but what are the pros and cons of defunding active projects? And that is part of what council wants to have more time to discuss, is the pros and cons of discussing some projects. And the PV project and the EV parking for the Silicon Valley Hopper are 2 of the projects that we'll discuss on May 6th. And that is it. I'm available if you have questions.
Are there any questions? Any clarifying questions from questions? Bonnie?
I got a couple, but after you all. Oh,
I have one on year 4, where you're talking about the golf course. Were they gonna look at recycling irrigation water? That was one of the things that I've always heard discussed. Is there any discussion about using recycle when we do that?
We recycled water feasibility study this last year, and based on the information provided, that existing recycled water facilities are actually just way too far away to tap into reasonably at this point in time. We did look at the possibility of an on-site stormwater or wastewater treatment facility for recycled water, and the return on investment for that was something like 50 years. So it was just not really feasible when you're looking for facilities to have 30 to 80, 40-year life cycle, 50 years, just kind of out of that. So it didn't make sense.
Yeah, because, well, year 4, you were talking 4 years out, and I was thinking down at the bay, they have the RO plant, so. It's
It really is. It's about if it's possible for Cal Water, who's currently the company that's got recycled water facilities closest to Cupertino, if they were able to extend their existing recycled water surfaces somewhere closer to Blackberry Farm within that time period, we would look at that option.
Yeah.
But right now, they're up around Wolf Road and Homestead. The estimate's about $40 to $50 million just to get it down to about Highway 85 and Stevens Creek, which is a lot of money. We just don't see that happen in the next 4 years or so. So with this project, we're just looking to upgrade the existing irrigation system so that we utilize less water. So that would be kind of the sustainability aspect of it is the reduction in water use for that.
Got it. I have a couple of questions, is that okay? So with the outfall, is there gonna be any monitoring? Is it only stormwater, or are we monitoring the quality of the outfall or anything that's going into the, I guess out to the bay, since we're putting in new outfall registers or whatever?
There's not any plans to monitor the quality of that water. A lot of our efforts from the city are upfront. Let's make sure that water is clean before it gets into the storm drain system. Ursula and her crew are doing a lot of work to put in trash capture devices, sweep the street, and try and keep stuff from getting out of there. They monitor for illicit discharges, and if we find that somebody has illicitly discharged in the storm drain system, we go in and have them clean the storm drain system. So
Okay,
we try and clean it before it gets into the storm drain.
all right, great. And then one last question. With the library fire alarm system and doing that, is the county gonna help Richard?
Our intent is to reach out to the county and have them help facilitate with that. Consider it a CIP project, and the county is typically well, they're helpful when it comes to CIP projects.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
we will
Okay,
be working with them on that.
thank you, because that's only a slight increase, is 2.3 times the existing budget, so. Thanks.
On my end, I'm assuming your ADA improvements are funded by CDBG, right? Is that correct? Or is that another correct?
No,
No.
the CDBG funds?
Yeah, it says annually funded, so is that through general funds?
Yeah, general funds. The CDBG funds, we do have some grant money going towards some of the work that we're doing at the senior center. Because the CDBG funds are housing related, typically those grant funds that we receive or are received typically can only go towards particular communities. And for the city's facilities, as far as I know, only the senior center is applicable.
Some of the ADA work we do is for sidewalks, curb ramps, exterior facilities around various city facilities. We have used CDBG funds in the past for that work, and we kind of got a little bit of a hard time for it. So we kind of backed off of it, and we're focusing on other areas. Senior center, work at the senior center has been one of those that's been hasn't received that sort of criticism.
Got it. I know you probably work, or depending on the structure that the city goes with on the CDBG management coordination plan. But that makes sense. In terms of the amounts for year 2 and year 4, that's above the $2 million a year. So staff doesn't see any concerns with that, since I know the current annual CIP funding is $2 million a year. So even though for the next year it's a little bit over 3 mil, is that a concern, or it will be fine?
I can answer that, Susan. Yes, it is a concern. One of the reasons we call it out, we're above the $2 million. We'll be looking for external funding sources to kind of cover that gap where possible. And if we're unable to do that, we'll go in hat in hand to city council. We have a little bit more general fund money for that. For the library, do hope to get the county involved to kind of help cover some of that gap so that we can get down to the 2 million. And then we do believe that we can find some grant funding for golf course to kind of help bring that down. So we have some plans to try and bring that down, but we don't have those funds secured yet. So it's one reason we're calling it out.
And forgive me, it's like I'm in my staff mode right now, so I'm just thinking of different ideas. In terms of the unfunded projects, and I know that when it comes to asking for grants at the federal level or even earmarks at the state level, if the state has money, a lot of the times they fund shovel-ready projects. Is that an option in terms of seeking funds from the federal, congressional level, or even at the states through our representatives?
Some of those are possible. At this point in time, we're trying to focus on existing projects that council has already approved to find that external funding where possible. We have had in the past some luck getting funds for other unfunded projects that may be within master plans. But we would need to work with city council on whether they wanted us to pursue those efforts.
Is any money going to come from the federal to California? I mean, right now,
There is the question. At this point in time, the federal grant monies that we do have, we don't believe they're in jeopardy. We don't have any evidence that they are taking those away at this point in time. A lot of the funds we have are more infrastructure related. I think the biggest concerns right now are regarding the IRA funds, the reimbursements for sustainable projects like the solar voltaic project. There is some concern that those may be at risk, but from the information we've been able to ascertain, the federal government has not touched those yet. They are requiring that they personally approve them all, but they haven't touched those because our understanding is about 60% of that money is going towards red states, and the representatives of the red states have said, please don't touch it. So with respect to the PE project, we are hoping to be able to get part of that budget or that funding reimbursed from the feds. With that stated, if it weren't reimbursed from the feds, there still is a return on investment for that project of about 16 years. So it's still a good project fiscally to move forward. We're able to get those IRA funds. The return on investment is reduced to about 9 years. So we're hoping to get that fund.
okay, questions are now popping back from when I first read this thing. I understand that we're waiting for the county to help us with the electrification of the library. And also the Blackberry Farm is a little bit higher, so we're putting that off, but we're losing. Is it NEEM?
M2, yeah.
Yeah, M2. Which I'm super aware of because I've had to deal with it at home. And that's a big deal because that takes away a lot of the benefits of getting the photoelectric.
Maybe Susan can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe NEM2 has been taken away yet. There's discussion of that at the state level. Our understanding is we are still within the period to be able to receive those funds.
So we were grandfathered in from an earlier request, but that's gonna be that cutoff date is end of this year, I believe.
April 16th, 2026.
Okay, this,
We are
so I'm
fully
just, no, I mean, this is city business, it's really close to our home business. And so I've gone through all, and that's why when I was reading this, I'm going, because I read the whole thing, and I agree with what we put off, what we embraced and for the current electrification, but the rates are going to change, and whether or not it's I don't know, it's the devil's choice for.
Yeah, and so Susan is working diligently on our photovoltaic project. The consultant and contractor is committed to having these systems up and running before April 16th deadline. So we are worried about it, which is why we're working hard to get it done, but we do states. We have looked at the return on investment if you shift to M3, and of course, shoots it out a little bit further, but still stays within a reasonable timeline to where there is still a benefit. What do you recall what that return on investment was for the NEM3? Wasn't it pushing it out to? I want to say it pushed it out to 15 or 16 years, but then if we also didn't get the IRA funds, it pushes out to about 20. And with photovoltaic systems,
20 years is a sweet spot. I mean, anything resolved earlier than that is extra.
yeah,
But 20 years is a sweet spot because after that, then you're starting to look at reduced.
yes, reduced efficiency.
Yeah.
We are looking at, I think it's a 30-year life cycle for these. So at 20 years, we still believe there's a good fiscal benefit.
There is. Just, but it's sort of like me. I'm starting to dwindle. So, so I'm good. Okay. So the Blackberry Farm is just basically, is it just, are we sort of gonna write that off?
It's mostly redoing the irrigation system, the existing.
No, I meant in terms of electrification, the photovoltaic.
Yeah, we're not doing photovoltaic at Blackberry Farm.
Okay.
The council came down to.
That's basically what my concern was that, okay, the others were gonna rush and get done.
Yeah, so we're looking at Quinlan, the sports center and community hall. Those were the ones that we were directed by council.
Yeah. Okay, and then are we concerned, and I'm looking at my leader here, are we concerned about with the library working with the county of missing our deadline there?
So we're not putting photovoltaic on the library at this point in time.
I understand that, but we were with the idea that we would work with the county, right?
We are going to miss the NEM2 deadline for the library. The hope with the library is to do more of a battery storage and photovoltaic system, which would disqualify us from the NEM2 anyway.
Okay,
So it's a bigger project.
okay,
And I'll just remind you that all of our municipal facilities are on a zero emissions electric plan. So it doesn't actually impact our greenhouse gases.
okay.
So just our pricing.
I just worry about these heads. Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any members of the public that have questions?
No question.
Can we move on to item number 4?
Discussion, if there's any
Oh, I thought the question was discussion.
technical clarification.
Sorry. Okay, discussion. Discussion.
Okay.
Is staff seeking any specific recommendation? It's just input, right? So.
We just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Go
ahead.
We're just looking for if there's any input or thoughts on what's being proposed at this point in time, kind of providing you also an update on where we are with our existing projects. Forward. And again, I think concerns regarding federal funding and whatnot, it's kind of give everybody an idea of where we're at. City council has requested that we come back. I think it's the first meeting in May to discuss defunding 6 projects. 2 of those projects are considered in our sustainability category. They're looking at the photovoltaic system. There are concerns about federal funding, there are concerns about not hitting the NEM2 deadline. So they want to talk about that. And the other one they want to talk about is the Silicon Valley EV charging stations. Silicon Valley Hopper runs on, it's an all electric fleet. Right now, we have the good graces of De Anza College. They are providing electric charging spaces, but it's, for all intents and purposes, a handshake deal. They can tell us to get off at any time, and at that point in time, we'd be looking for places to charge them. We are coordinating with the city of Santa Clara to see if there's options over there, but it'd be nice if we did have our own charging stations for them. That is one of those projects that'll be discussed about defunding.
School district is putting in some chargers at each one of the sites, but I don't think it's enough locations for you to charge a fleet. But the school district is doing some also.
worth talking to them. We only have 13 vehicles. It's not like we have 100.
I know there's sites going in on my school campus and they're electrifying all the campuses and putting in solar. So,
The discussion period is when you can speak up and say, I 100% support not defunding these, or I'm okay with defunding these.
I'm excited about this. This is great.
Yeah. Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Why does it cost so much money once we get the systems installed? Both the class, the 220 and the whatever it is, 7 something.
DC fast chargers.
Yeah, once they get in, I understand that you have the initial, you have to get the infrastructure in there, you have to build it, you have to get the equipment and everything, but yearly upkeep seems to be really high and it did, and I don't want it to go long term, I just wanted you guys understood why these systems need so much upkeep, and I understand that when we used to have 8 years ago, we had an electric car and every place we went, they were broken. So I'm just wondering, it seems like there's a lot of non-moving parts.
And I could probably talk with you a little bit more offline about that. I don't know that necessarily it's expensive. It's just a lot of the older chargers were under different agreements and the agreement terms are strange.
But we have when I was looking at yesterday, when I was looking through the yearly maintenance costs, it seemed high to me.
I have to look
And
at
it might just be because I don't understand how we do things here.
I might need to look at it, see if I'm not necessarily equipped to answer.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. Shall we move on to item number 4? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
So item number 4 is policy options of electrification for Cupertino's existing commercial.
Great. And we have 2 representatives from Remy Associates on the line. If you want to come off mute and turn your video on, I will pull up your slides for you.
Thank you.
Feel free to begin and introduce yourselves.
Okay, great. Your story. Hi, I'm Walker Wells. I'm a principal at Ramey Associates, and we've been working with Tori and Ursula for a while now on this question of what are the decarbonization, electrification strategies that could be considered for commercial buildings. And we're going to share some information and some suggestions about that this evening. And then with me tonight is my colleague, Sammy. Do you want to say hi, Sammy?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sammy Taylor, Senior Sustainability Planner with Ramey Associates. Really excited to hear your feedback on these options.
Yeah, great. Okay, so here's our agenda that we want to provide some sort of general background, kind of where this work originated from in the work plan and the climate action plan, and then talk about a couple of different options, replacement of older equipment with new efficient heat pump equipment, what's called a flex path approach for promoting energy efficiency and electrification, and a third option of benchmarking, which can lead to something called a building performance standard. And this idea of benchmarking and building performance standards is in the climate action plan, which is why we've been spending time on this particular effort. And then, of course, some time for questions, comments from all of you. Okay, so a little bit of background on decarbonization. As I mentioned, the fiscal year 24-25 work program includes this item: public outreach, policy research, coordinate with regional efforts to look at policy options for electrifying Cupertino's buildings, and then to do that in light of this decision by the California Restaurant Association in the city of Berkeley that determined that local agencies, public agencies cannot supersede the federal government's authority to regulate certain appliances, like hot water heaters and HVAC equipment or air conditioning, heating equipment. And to date, work has already been completed. That's why you see the check box for new buildings. And so tonight we're really focusing on existing commercial buildings. And then I think later there's a presentation about existing residential buildings. Then moving into the climate action plan, there are a couple of items, the building energy -1 and building energy -3 that provide direction on this topic. So building energy 1.3 speaks about establishing an energy benchmarking program that requires large commercial entities over 10,000 square feet to report their energy use annually. And then BE-3 has a couple of items. Develop a commercial building electrification strategy, doing outreach to the commercial building sector. And then it speaks to adopting an electrification ordinance that would ban natural gas. That has since been determined to be illegal, that you're not able to put in a direct gas ban or even an indirect gas ban, because that would be setting a standard that is higher than what the federal standard is, because federal energy standards allow equipment that has the efficiency level of natural gas, whereas most electric equipment is much more efficient. So that's determined to be not an option, but we still have some options. And then again, talking about doing outreach and engagement to get input from property owners. So there's a few considerations, just to reiterate a little bit of what I've said is, California cities do have the ability to adopt local requirements that are more stringent than the state. This isn't the case in all states. I was talking to a colleague this morning who's in Massachusetts, and she says, cities can't adopt a standard more stringent than the state. So we have a unique ability to do this in California, which is good. We just have to go through a couple steps to do it in sort of the right way to meet all these requirements. So these amendments would touch on the building code Title 24, and there's two pieces that it touches, which is the energy code Part 6, and then the Cal Green Code, which is Part 11. To adopt local standards, the Energy Commission does require that a cost effectiveness evaluation is completed, and they determine cost effectiveness as being that any incremental cost for the efficiency measures need to be paid back over the life of the equipment. So the whole equipment doesn't have to be paid off. That's a different financial calculation. It's just if there's an incremental cost for the efficiency measures, you need to make sure you get that money back over the life of the equipment. So that's state requirements. And then at the federal level, this Energy Policy and Conservation Act gives the federal government the authority to regulate certain appliances, like I've already talked about, and local governments can't supersede those requirements. So a local ordinance has to include things that are cost effective and doesn't preempt EPCA. And that's sort of how we have to thread the needle these days. Just a little more information on the evolution of building codes. Go to the next slide. You can just see there's some context for all of this work on electrification. So we get a new building code that goes into effect on the 1st of January of 2026, and that code uses electric heat pump equipment as its baseline. It's baseline for efficiency. So it's going to be quite difficult for projects that decide they still wanted to use gas for whatever reason to achieve that level of a comparable level of efficiency through other measures like insulation or windows or whatever. So the state is definitely moving everybody towards electrification. And then we see some local initiatives through the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. BACMA is interested in oxides of nitrogen because this is part of smog, and it can convert into low-level ozone. So they're not really focused on the energy part, they're focused on the air emissions. But these emissions occur when you combust natural gas or methane, and you get these oxides of nitrogen. So you can see that water heaters will no longer be sold in the Bay Area, gas ones in 2027. and space heaters in 2029. CARB, the State Air Resources Board, is looking at establishing zero emission appliance standards by 2030 or has established. And then there's a long-term goal, again, tying back into your climate action plan, of the state achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. We can go to the next slide and look at some of these options that we wanted to share with you. So I'll walk you through this. So over on the left, you see a couple of options, replacing conventional air conditioning with heat pump air conditioning and replacing a conventional gas water heater, either electric or, well, replacing a conventional water heater, either electric or gas, to a heat pump water heater. That could be a first step that could happen, as you see up there on the top, at time of replacement. So when one of those things breaks, replacing it with the heat pump option. And then we have this second option of what's called flex path, which typically happens when people are doing renovations or remodels of significant size, say 500 square feet or greater, that you can ask for kind of a constellation or a group of energy and electrification measures as part of their permit process. And just to go a little further, the heat pump and space heating and cooling replacement is already identified in the 2025 Cal Green code as an allowable voluntary action that local governments can adopt. So that's already been vetted and something that you can move forward on. And then you can see some of the other advantages of, as you go through, that, you know, it's fairly straightforward to implement. Many of these pieces of equipment have been determined to be cost effective. And then you see with the flex path, it's larger projects, more opportunities for replacement, moving towards more efficient equipment and appliances, and therefore more potential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You can go to the next slide. So this flex path approach, not surprisingly, the goal is to give people flexibility in how they want to improve their homes and reduce energy use and move off of gas. Trigger is usually a larger renovation. You have to have one pathway that complies with EPCA, that doesn't exceed federal standards. It has to be cost effectiveness. And then the way this works is that different measures, as you're seeing on the table, are given point values, and those point values are based on the associated energy savings on an annual basis. So 1 point is equivalent to 1 million British thermal units of savings. And then the amount of savings is adjusted by climate zone, so it's reflective of where you are. And so the way this works is there needs to be a pathway that is, again, EPCA compliant, cost effective. And as long as you have that one pathway, you can put other things on the list that people could choose to do voluntarily. So just to give you an example, say you needed 10 points to comply with this flex path ordinance, if Cupertino adopted one. You could go to the table and say, I'm just going to do my heat pump water heater. I get 12 points, I'm done. I think from our perspective, that's a great outcome. It's more efficient, it's electrification, we get everything we want. But someone could say, I don't want to do that. Instead, let's see, I'm going to do kind of in the middle here, new ducts, duct ceiling, upgrade my wall insulation, and change my windows. So right there, I think we're at 14 points, well above what's needed to get to, say, a 10-point minimum. And you could start to see how an applicant could puzzle together the 10 points in a way that meets their needs, provides the greatest value to them. And this next slide just provides a bit of a summary of this. We got some permit data and did analysis of how many permits go through the city that are of sort of substantial in nature, such that this type of flex path approach could be would be reasonable to apply, and came up with a number of slightly less than 100 projects. So we're not capturing hundreds and thousands of buildings in your city every year. It's sort of a slow trickle of upgrade and incremental process, which means that the GHG reduction potential is relatively low. And the cost of the property owner can vary. They may be able to do things that are, affordable, they can do themselves, not, or they could choose to do things that are more expensive. There is an equity concern that the higher, the costs would be the same if you're sort of higher income or lower income. So there may be a sort of regressive nature to this if incentives aren't provided. We think it's fairly easy to implement, so the impact on staffing would be relatively low. And then we can see which parts of the code are touched on, which is typical. We do not have an example of this being applied to commercial buildings, but there's many examples, or well, several at least examples, Santa Cruz, Santa Monica, San Luis Obispo, that have taken this flex path approach for residential buildings. So this basically would get you all the little projects. And then this next approach gets you to the bigger buildings. This building performance standard, it's called. And what it does is it requires property owners to, gotta catch my slides up with your slides. Require property owners to submit annually a report on their energy use. And then over time, you can get data in the city to understand what energy use looks like and use that to set a standard of performance, building performance standard that typically steps down each year, moving towards that carbon neutrality by 2045 level. And so we have a few more slides on what this energy benchmarking looks like. So the way this works is you pick a square footage that needs to comply or would be covered. It can go down as low as 10,000. In our state, buildings over 50,000 square feet already have to report to the state. And pretty much everybody uses this Energy Star portfolio manager. It's developed by the Environmental Protection Agency, free, and people will put in their energy data and their water data on an annual basis. And you can see how you're doing. It lets you compare with other buildings in your climate zone, and it's climate adjusted. And so you can determine if your building is doing well or poorly. And hopefully with that information, decide to make some adjustments. So this benchmarking, just establishing where you are, is like the first foundational step in this building performance standard process. We can go to the next slide. Okay, and then again, the building performance standard, the BPS, then establishes a target that you need to reach, on an annual basis, a certain amount of energy use per square foot per year, or a certain amount of greenhouse gases per square foot per year. This again gets generated by putting your information into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. The results for buildings under 50,000 square feet would be sent to the city, over 50,000 city and state. And then over time, the standard gets to be increasingly stringent as buildings improve efficiency and switch off of gas and onto electrification, which is what you see down here in the arrow, which starts with benchmarking. There's benchmarking plus, which is what the phase that San Jose is in now, of saying, now you've done benchmarking, we want you to follow that up with energy audits or retro commissioning to understand how you could really improve performance of your building. And then a number of cities have used energy use intensity as their initial standard, because it's a little more comprehensible. It's looking at kilowatt hours and therms and BTUs, things people are more familiar with, and then ultimately moving to a standard that's based on what we really are interested in, which is carbon dioxide equivalents per square foot. And then the diagram on the right, it's kind of tiny, but it's just showing a number of things that can be done: changing equipment, adding solar panels, adjusting thermostats, educating people about how to use the building, updating equipment, making sure it's running correctly. All strategies that can help buildings achieve that standard of performance, which is a core part of the BPS. Next slide. This gives a couple of examples to show you a little more about how this works. So the table is from Denver, and it's just showing that the standard isn't the same for every building. It's not a one size fits all. And so there's a sort of a number of building types that are included and referenced in the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and then the software and Portfolio Manager lets you compare yourself to buildings around the country, and it will also give you this number of energy use intensity. And so what Denver did was use the benchmarking data over several years to then determine what those numbers should look like, sort of what the average is for each of those building types. And then they figure out what at what pace they need to step down energy use or increase efficiency to get to their ultimate goal, which you can see on the right is an illustration of what's happening in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They're saying non-residential large properties, the blue line, between 2025 and 2030 need to have a 20% savings. The smaller properties, they're asking for a 40% savings. And you see how it just steps down over time with that ultimate goal of getting to neutrality. Next slide. Okay, impact in Cupertino through the building performance standard. So it depends on what ultimately gets selected. So our starting point is the total number of commercial buildings in your city. So there's 3,280 commercial buildings in your city. That goes from 100 square foot building up to the biggest building that you have. So that's everybody. And then we kind of sliced it up and determined that the number of buildings that are larger than 50,000 square feet already reporting to the state, 127. And then you can just see it sliding down. So if you picked 20,000 square feet as your threshold, there would be 300 buildings-ish that would need to report every year. And if we go to 15,500 and 10,000, which is the number in the cap as a guidance, 923 buildings that would need to report every year, and their reports would need to get sort of reviewed and verified by staff. And then what happens is, by capturing a relatively small number of buildings, but the big buildings, you can also capture a good chunk, at least 50% of the square footage in the city, and therefore about 50% of the energy use and emissions related to commercial buildings. So you'll see on the next slide, I think. Yeah. So this talks about benchmarking only and building performance standard, but the number of buildings would be the same, depending on where the threshold is, 127 or 923. But if we're only doing benchmarking, it's informational, so the impact on GHG is low. But if you move into the building performance standard, the impact is quite high. We're not getting 100 small remodels. We're getting consistent energy efficiency and electrification among the larger buildings in your community. So really able to take a big bite out of the annual greenhouse gas emissions. Benchmarking only is relatively cost effective. It's sort of a reporting process, could be, $750,000 a year if people aren't able to do the reporting themselves. On the building performance standard, it'll depend on the state of the building, but if the building is in poor shape, it may need to make significant investments to reach those performance standards, particularly as things step down, or it might require replacing gas equipment with electric equipment to improve efficiency and clearly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Similar equity considerations. Either benchmarking or building performance standards would require more staff. And certainly the building performance standard to verify, those numbers of properties, could require, additional full-time equivalent staff. A good thing with this approach is we'd be modifying the municipal code, so we're not touching the building code and don't need to go through the cost effectiveness test or have it reviewed by the Building Standards Commission. It also makes it less exposed to some of these ongoing efforts to limit local government's ability to impose local efficiency standards or concerns about outlawing gas. So it kind of exists in a different place. It's a little more protected. And there you can see on the bottom some information who is doing benchmarking and then who is looking at building performance standards. Number of them are big cities, but we are seeing more smaller cities getting into the building performance standard arena. Next slide. Just a couple more to go. So we just want to share with you the public outreach that we've done today and some of the takeaways. So back in September, we had a couple of roundtables with representatives from retail office in larger multifamily properties. City staff participated in a small business resource fair in December, did a survey in December, and we tried unsuccessfully to reach out to some of the strip mall owners, small commercial properties, trying to understand this issue of equity and really their ability to comply with an ordinance once you get down to, say, the 10,000 square foot level. Now, this could be small properties, mom and pops, not a full-time property manager. We need to be reasonable about who a program like this would apply to, make sure that they can actually follow through. Some things we learned: number of people are already doing portfolio manager, quite familiar with it. We saw that 64% of the people we talked to were supportive of having an annual energy reporting requirement. About 30% of the people had already been doing things related to energy. And then, a concern about meeting the performance requirements if there's concerns about fixed budgets for operations and maintenance. So a number of the ordinances in other cities say, if you can't hit the standard, then there's other things that you can do related to energy audits or coming up with a 3-year plan to bring down your energy use. So if you can't hit it in exactly the compliance here, that they'll kind of give you a backdoor to do some analysis and figure out a plan for getting back on track. I think that's the last slide for me. So we had one more slide, I guess. Just had a few questions about, interest in pursuing the flex path for the smaller projects where people have, choices in how they're going to achieve the number of points needed to comply. Again, this would be for sort of modest size and up remodels. Is there interest in energy benchmarking? What size might be appropriate? And then should we continue to pursue this exploration of a building performance standard? And then the final slide has the recommendation from staff, but maybe we'll leave. I guess we can read this one and then maybe go back to the questions. So the recommendation is to receive this presentation and recommend that City Council direct staff to pursue adoption of FlexPath and develop an ordinance establishing benchmarking for buildings of 10,000 square feet and larger with the intent of phasing in a building performance standard. And the reason for doing this is to support the climate action plan and sort of broader sustainability goals of the city. Okay, thank you. And then maybe we'll go back to the slide with the questions on it.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed to clarifying questions at this point. Does anyone have any questions?
I got one, but Jack.
No. On the, when I was looking at your example for the flex path for a lot of alternatives, I'm not quite sure, is that a cookie cutter set of alternatives with same weights, or is it customized for that particular building?
So the list is up to you to make. So you can, maybe we can go back to that slide. I think it has the FlexPath table on it.
Because I was looking at it and going like, well, I don't really use hot water, but I can buy a hot water, electric hot water heater and game the system.
Yeah.
So that's why I was looking at that, trying to figure out how, if that is going to be I can see if someone's approaching it honestly, it's really nice, but I'm also looking at this like buying energy credits with Brazilian, nut farmers. In order so I can do more Bitcoins, it's my coal-fired thing.
Mhm.
So there's that, and the other one, a couple of questions on the BPS.
Okay.
I'm assuming from the way we're talking that the meters are smart meters, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and does PG&E help itemize stuff for the property managers?
Yeah, so, well,
Let me
just
get
to,
Guess
I
my
know-
question, will they
yeah.
be going? I'm a property manager. I'm also the owner, I'm also, run the business and everything like that. I'm not I'm not like Apple where this is, you hire somebody whose job it is to do this. And this is once again, another thing that I have to deal with. How complex is it gonna be? How much help am I gonna get from the city, from PG&E to do due diligence? Because I wanna do the right thing, but at the same time, I'm on my wits end. That make sense?
It totally makes sense, which is, I think, why it's really important to think about where that square footage level is set. Once, at what level is it a investment property with professional property management and staff to do these types of things? And, so we think you can go as low as 10,000, but you can't go lower than that. So, keep in mind that 10,000, it's, 10-unit apartment building, just to give you a sense of scale. These measures are looking at commercial buildings, but it could be like a small medical office. You get up into the 20,000 square foot range, it's a more substantial building, and it's more likely that there would be capacity to deal with this reporting regime. And then to your other question, you can request from PG&E the aggregated energy use in the building. So that's how it works. So you don't have to go and get the information from everybody's meters. They'll bundle it up and give it to you as a block. So the individual tenants' energy use is continue to be made private. So those privacy concerns are addressed.
So, and that would be especially good for an apartment owner.
Mhm.
Okay,
And I can add to that answer. I have to do the city's reporting to the state on behalf of the library is over 50,000 square feet. And the first year I did it, it took me a while, the better part of a day, to read all the instructions and figure out how to get PG&E to give the authority to send my information. But after that, when I helped create a little cheat sheet, it's much more streamlined the second time.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm a beekeeper. Every year, multiple agencies want me to fill out an extensive, detailed survey. I have to roam every time it happens. So I'm just feeling the pain. We need to do this. Okay, I think it's all great. It's just, I want us, hopefully the city will find ways to guide
Yeah.
for business owners to be able to do this as painlessly as possible.
And Commissioner
Yeah.
Carter, I'll just remind you, we're in questions right now,
Okay,
not
sorry.
conversation.
Sorry.
And we may want to go back to the questions that we put on that next to last slide.
This is clarifying questions for you, Walker, and then we go into answering your questions in a minute.
Alex had a question.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fung.
I don't know if this is a place to talk about it, but I'm curious. Does the city have the capacity to be able to implement some of these or take on additional responsibilities with this? I love these ideas, but I don't know if the city manager has plans to give you more staff or more funding to hire consultants to help with some of this. That's my clarifying question.
Would you like me to answer that one?
Yeah.
Okay, So that would be part of our requirement when we bring the proposed ordinance language. So at this point, to complete the city work program, we are going to plan to do a memo to council and say, please direct us to pursue the actual ordinance language. And then when they, if and when they approve the ordinance language, part of that would say, hey, you need to hire extra staff.
Got it.
I will add that there has been conversation about doing a regional approach to this. There's pros and cons with that. So if like Silicon Valley Clean Energy came in and helped do the reporting and streamlined the requirements, they would probably do it on behalf of all their jurisdictions, and then the threshold might not go to 10,000 square feet. They might stop it at 20 or 30,000 square feet and try to hit the larger businesses. So it wouldn't be tailored to Cupertino. And it would probably take several years to get all the cities to adopt an enforcement ordinance and to agree to work with SVCE on their behalf, and trying to get all of the city councils in the region to agree on something. So there's some pros and cons.
And are there ongoing regional activities from BACnet or SVCU right now, or?
To pursue a building performance standard. I just did a presentation to the regional sustainability managers last month to try to get some action on this. But at this time, there's no appetite. It's coming soon, hopefully. They are attracted to the idea, but nothing's in action.
San Clair County.
This was to the SVCE jurisdictions.
All right, well, any more clarifying questions?
Quick question. So this was mostly focused on commercial, completely? Okay.
Yeah.
What is the residential side of it? Is that, or is that
Coming next.
stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We don't have any members of the public.
Would you like to comment? Okay.
Okay. All right. Can we move on to commission discussion then?
Yes. So we have these questions to kind of help shape the conversation. But ultimately, I'm going to pull up a Word document and ask you guys to wordsmith a sentence or two to then I'll put on the memo when we give that to City Council. So I can leave these questions up here, or I can switch over to the Word document when you're ready.
Switch.
Okay. And so ultimately I put this here for for you, if you wanted that as your base starting point to wordsmith. But I will type in whatever you want to nominate, so you can totally change it. But to help shape the question, I guess it's two parts or three parts. One is, do you want to do flex path, and then put that in the sentence? And then, do you want to do energy benchmarking? And then, do you want to do these other pieces? So it's kind of 4 different conversations,
But they're all contained in that state.
but they're all going to be contained in a statement.
Okay.
So is it flex path, benchmark, what was the last one?
Building performance standard, and then if you want to make a recommendation onto what building size, but you also don't have to make those recommendations. If you just say, yeah, we want to move forward and figure out the building size later, these are just discussion questions to help phrase that statement.
Recommendation then, right?
Yes.
To direct staff to pursue adoption of a flex path reach code for commercial buildings and develop an ordinance establishing an energy benchmarking requirement for buildings 10,000 or larger. The intent to phase in a building performance standard to support the city's climate action plan 2.0.
Yes.
Existing commercial buildings emission reduction goal. That's a, is that
It's
one
a long,
sentence?
tell me about it.
2.0, you have to put climate action 2.0, don't you?
We can make that correction in your guys' recommendation.
Does anybody have any input? Do you want
I mean, I am actually in favor more of a 20,000 square foot or larger facility rather than 10,000. I would love to get the 10,000 involved, to be honest, but so you above 20,000 square foot, you have 314, above 10,000 square foot, you have 923. So,
I will add in our calculations, about half of the 923 are owned by one business.
Oh,
oh.
okay, I know where they are even, right? Oh, it is cool. Okay,
All right, well, okay, then I'm fine with 10,000. Okay,
Thank you for the extra information. So the wordsmithing, I mean, as opposed to us saying, do it,
You could not recommend FlexPath and put all your energy towards energy benchmarking. You could say the city is not in a fiscal place to try to pursue an energy benchmarking, just do
personally,
FlexPath.
this
Yeah.
commissioner. I've read the arguments, heard the arguments make sense. I brought up a few questions about the flex path, whether run around, but that would be probably a loophole that we fix later on anyway. So I could not see any holes in the argument that's given to us.
I actually like FlexPath because it's like shopping, you know. You get a menu, it's good.
But the other part of it is getting the picture of your building. And what, where the needs are.
Right.
It's really
But
important.
as a consumer, what I like is I can see where I get the biggest bang for my buck, because you put $1 next to it.
Yeah.
You can see what's going on there, so I really like that.
But I think you need, in some ways, I feel that you need the benchmarking, that's what we call it, right? What was the one where we got the picture? They had the,
That's FlexPath with the numbers.
oh, no.
The stairs,
That's building performance standards.
The
Yeah.
building performance standards. That tells you which one of these flood smart, I mean, because I'm guessing that the flex path is going to be customized. They maybe not the first round, but they'll find very quickly, they'll customize it to where, yeah, you don't have any oil, you don't need any boiling water, you can't use that, okay? Most of your energy is here, this is what it's big, so you gotta get the most points for this thing. And that's where
well, that's why they're doing the reporting too.
yeah, so that's why I think together they work.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Would you like to make the motion?
one more clarifying question. So this is to not wait for the regional endeavor, I'm assuming, since we are developing our own ordinance, okay? All right, yeah, then I'll move staff's recommendation forward.
Wanna go? So Alex,
Oh,
You have to read the whole thing.
okay, I move to direct staff to pursue adoption of the flex path for REACH code for commercial buildings and development ordinance establishing an energy benchmarking requirement for buildings 10,000 square feet or larger, with the intent to phase in a building performance standard to support cities' climate action plans, existing commercial buildings, emission reduction goal.
Do you want to change it to 2.0?
2.0, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
pretty good, you only slowed down at the end then. That's because you ran out of air.
I did.
Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Carter seconds.
All right, we'll go to a roll call vote. Chair Hansen,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fung,
Aye.
Commissioner Yang,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter.
Aye.
And Commissioner Padgonkar absent.
Okay, well, it looks like we're gonna go ahead and move on that.
Thank you for your presentation and your time.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was hard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can we move on to item 5, policy options for electrification of Cupertino's existing residential buildings?
Wonderful. I will be giving the presentation tonight. I'm Victoria Morin, Sustainability Specialist at the City of Cupertino. So this will look pretty parallel to commercial buildings with a few exceptions. So your background is the same city work program item, but now we are moving on to the next circle. Our climate action plan does call out residential buildings separately, but the terms ultimately look pretty similar. There is a larger focus on equity with low income, seniors, et cetera, making sure that we are really considering the greater population in Cupertino. But 2.4 does have the same language that it bans the natural gas infrastructure at time of replacement or renovation. So we are pivoting that approach, and that's why we're exploring other policy options here today. So same regional and state context for electrification applies to residential. We just went over a lot of this, but I will talk a little bit more about the energy code as it applies to residential in a second. And then BACMed is banning the sale of water heaters and space heater requirements coming up soon. So we are doing some contractor training to educate contractors on how to install those new appliances. And then there will be more progress in 2030 and 2045. So going on to the state building code and what that looks like. So the state is making progress from 2022 standards to 2025 standards. They're moving in the right direction, specifically calling out now they're allowing heat pumps for space or for air conditioning and space heating. They were allowed before, but now they're progressing. But they're not progressing as far as electric readiness or again, this flex path menu approach that parallels what we were just talking about. And then what I'll dive into today are these additional add-ons, right? So same legal limitations apply as what we were just talking about, that we can go above and beyond the state requirements. But this looks a little bit different. So we have the AC to heat pump. So that's at time of replacement when you buy it, or not when you buy, sorry, when you install a new or replace an AC unit, we would require it to be a heat pump, which ultimately means that it could heat your home as well. This is part of the CalGreen voluntary pathway, so we wouldn't have to do that cost effectiveness study. We could ultimately adopt it. But the electric readiness and the flex path, those are both triggered by time of renovation and would need that cost effectiveness study to go in them. We would adopt either the electric readiness or the flex path because the flex path does allow for that electric readiness to be part of that scoring criteria. So considerations, hopefully this isn't too much on one slide, but the point here is that there are some pros and cons with each one. So if we wanted to be the most ambitious, we would do multiple of them, and the biggest, we would do the AC heat pump and the flex path approach. But it might come with upfront high costs. It could lead to bill savings, and we know the flex path has a menu of options. So depending on which of those standards they chose, it could be more or less effective and it could be more or less costly. And then just requiring the electrical upgrade would be a lower impact, but it would be more of that equitable, not making a lot of progress, not forcing a lot of change. And the intention with the electric readiness, which we didn't talk about with commercial as much, this would apply. And we all know how hard it is to upgrade just your electrical panel, right? So that would be step one. And the hope is that if you upgrade that panel, then it would be a no-brainer when your appliance dies that you would make that switch. But you'd have to have good faith that the people would make that switch because they're now capable to do it. I'll give you a second to read the slide before I go on. We can come back to it. These will be posted today.
Oh, okay.
So there's a big caveat with this. There is a new bill coming down that was introduced in February of this year that supports streamlining new housing processes by not updating the building standards. This is a big problem for us because it means that we can't adopt anything that we were talking about today. I will say no more changes to your building code until 2031 building code, which would go into effect in 2032. So this has passed the assembly floor and will need to be voted by the Senate for consideration. There is a lot of effort coming from everyone in California. Our SVCE, all our providers are making big oppositions to this, saying, hey, will you make an amendment to existing building code? Right, you can keep the streamline for new construction, but please allow us some flexibility for existing buildings to help move our efforts forward. And I have been told that it's optimistic. We have not given up hope that the Senate will make this exemption or change in the code in the language of the bill. But that being said, this would squash all of our policy options and leave us with no path forward for residential decarbonization, electrification at this point. In light of that, we had started doing a survey before this bill started, and we're going to continue with our city work program as directed to do public outreach. So hopefully you are aware, as you all tabled, to help get the public outreach going with this survey. It is translated into Chinese and Hindi now. We are doing specific outreach door to door to do low and fixed income housing, working with our Rise Housing. We did go to the senior center as well as working with the forum and other senior facilities. We have talked with youth groups and the Rotary Club to try to get the word out. And we have a couple more weeks. For those of you who are tabling at Cherry Blossom Festival, you'll be working on this again. And so in the farmers market. So we are doing quite a few, as much as we possibly can. We have about 300 survey responses so far. So we're looking pretty good. And then I believe this is my almost last slide talking about programs and affordability. Although this isn't directly related to policy, no matter what our policy outcomes are, we will continue to promote programs and educate residents on how to make these changes. On the left, we mentioned back in our last commission meeting and some announcements, but this Go Electric Advisor is really a turnkey program. They walk residents through step-by-step, talk from technical assistance, virtual audits. You actually like go on Zoom and show them your water heater and show them your panel. And they give you recommendations on how to develop a plan and find a contractor and apply for the rebates. So it is a program that is live and running and has no expiration date at this time. So if you know people, we're really trying to push it, but it's one of those things that people don't even know it exists yet. The SBC also released a cost effectiveness return on investment to learn if switching will save you money on your PG&E bill, and found the average was between $19 and $20 or $19, $20, $29 depending on your changes. But that went up to $150 per household depending on your usage and what you were doing before versus after. And then the last one I just threw on here, the Switch is On. If you haven't heard about that one, that is the best resource to find rebates, federal assistance, all of the things residential, you put in your zip code. And I believe there's 20 different programs out there to help residents make the switch. With that, some next steps for staff, analyzing the survey results. We're going to write this memo to City Council. Hopefully it will be completed with our recommendations and your recommendation in June. We're going to have to find out how the Senate votes in order to move forward and wait for City Council direction to move forward. So we have a few hurdles, but in the meantime, as I mentioned, we're going to continue with our education and outreach efforts as much as possible. There is a public webinar coming up. I believe there's a couple dates early May that SVC is hosting virtually educate residents. And I can send that information to you if you haven't seen it in our upcoming social media. And I believe that was it. So I will take clarifying questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Comments from members of the public?
All right, discussion? No discussion then.
Discussion, yes.
Okay, yes,
Without
Commissioner Burke.
expedited permitting, we're not going to get the electrical panel. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
So that's something the city can do.
We do offer over-the-counter permits, same day.
Wow.
So it is just about as expedited as it can be.
Okay.
That's just for upgrading on a single appliance. If it's a home renovation, it would be more of a process. And so yes, there are some technicalities. If you're applying for the rebate, they do require you to go through that permitting process. And we have calculated that a lot of people don't apply for the permits, so we don't have fully accurate statistics on how many people are gas versus electric right now, which adds some challenges for us to have accurate reporting of how much work this would be. But the policy would do what we can for the people who follow the legal permitting process that's required.
Were you speaking more to PG&E delays with electrical panel capacity? Or just?
When
the
I
city
when I did the standing out in front of our booth. That was one of the issues that people were talking about, it's like how do anything. Seems that Cupertino has a reputation, not as bad a reputation as San Francisco. San Francisco is purgatory or further, but with how turnaround on permitting, whether it's true or not, at least the perception's there. And
We just did my mother-in-law's house and we doubled our amperage on our electric panel and it wasn't bad, but I had a contractor that grew up in the area, knew the people behind the counter. Pretty much the big hiccup was getting PG&E out to flip the switch once they flipped it off to flip it back on. And that was
so
a
the
week,
perception is out there.
but that was a week.
I'm being told that from contractors, I'm being told that from our designer, I'm getting told that from the people that get there. I mean, I understand, I keep seeing comical things about the DMV being slow, and last couple times I'm with the DMV, I got this. They were
Yeah.
wonderful to me, but that perception is there, and that's gonna be, it's gonna be something we have to get over, right?
I think that's great feedback because it's probably not advertised that it's a over-the-counter process.
Yeah, and it's actually not that painful. I know other cities are painful, but that's because we do on the fly design changes and expect changes in the, because there has to be code updates and that kind of stuff. So if your prints aren't ready, then you have a problem, but if it's something as simple as upgrading, get an electrician in, they drop the lines, they do the runs and.
So
It's all done.
maybe when we put out blurbs about things, we could throw in a sentence about how easy it is,
Yeah,
what to do.
great feedback.
Yeah, that's a concierge thing. We talked about the concierge. So this is Silicon Valley Clean Energy's answer.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be just Cupertino, it would be anybody that uses Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Correct.
Good to know. All right,
I
thank you.
think it'd be good at the Go Electric Advisor too. That'd be good to push out during our next few events.
Yeah, Like a
Maybe
QR
another
code?
QR code along with
Okay.
the survey,
I agree.
because like what Victoria said, because people don't know about it, it's not. It's
Well,
not.
and then the QR code, one-stop shopping for permits. Do you know what I mean? The permitting process, another QR code to the front desk or something.
Okay,
So we need people to do that. And then an induction walk so we can, but, it's a
Well,
cherry blossom, we can make.
cotton candy or something,
Well, that's important.
And so on Pop D at.
Yeah, show it in person.
We were very afraid, I had to buy, we're getting a kitchen remodel.
Uh-huh.
It's like, all these things are very germane to me. So 2 years ago, I bought a portable induction.
Yeah.
For my wife to try out. It's important for people to get over the
Right.
fear of
That's why the.
work.
That's why the Martin Mann thing was really awesome for me, but I don't think everybody that wanted to go could get in because you were sold out like that, right?
We're hoping to do another one by the end of the fiscal year.
Or maybe bring him to the Cherry Blossom Festival. But yeah, I mean, just to have an induction thing there, so knows how to do it.
Yeah, not to go off on a tangent, but to Jack's point, I think part on the permitting side of things, I think sometimes the residents or even the moms and pops businesses, they hire contractors who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, don't get me started on that.
And that's complain about delays in the process. I don't think that's the city's fault, you know, it's like.
It's not, cause I had
Yeah.
a contractor who born and raised here. It's like through it, like we were waiting for cabinets. You know, but we had everything else.
Um,
Yeah, well, those-
yeah,
yeah, I mean, that's a side issue. It's like, yeah, we've had permitted stuff that turned out to be illegal. But those people are probably retired now. Yeah, I can go on that is forever, so you should not encourage them.
So we're not looking for a recommendation today because we want to wait for our public feedback before staff makes a formal recommendation, but just keeping those policy options in your head. Requiring the AC heat pump conversion on time of replacement or requiring this flex path or electric ready paneling. Hopefully, if it passes in the Senate, we can recommend those to council, and if we have some luck, then it will be on our side and we can move forward.
did the city provide like a support letter or something to whichever committee it is in the Senate right now?
Yes, you can do a letter of opposition with your suggested wording changes. The city council would have to send that. There are some templates and we have passed that on to city council and our city manager's office, but it would be up to them if they want to pursue that or not.
Do you need a permit to change out your, to get a new, hot water heater? Really?
Yes.
Okay, because in the past it was, it's leaking. Go down, hire, get one put in, so I don't, that might be another educational point.
Yeah.
Because if I don't know it, I'm on commission, boy.
If
It's
you want
not,
the rebates you can get, you need a permit. So that may.
But you don't think of rebates when your water heaters. You're not getting rebate if you're replacing it with another gas, right?
Correct.
And all you know is gas. And yours is currently leaking or about to leak. So you replace it, and now you have a new water heater. That we're going to try to convince you to change.
I'll just pop in that SVC did develop an emergency. Low voltage, I guess, that can just operate on a regular outlet. Heat pump water heater, so a smaller one, kind of tide people over if they need to. Do something to get ready for.
Yeah, I guess my point is, if I'm not educated to knowing the stuff.
Sure,
like
you
this,
wouldn't know all.
I would just, yeah.
on that line of thought, would it be overstepping our jurisdiction or whatever? If we had a list of approved contractors that knew all of the codes that we, like the certification from the Sustainability Commission?
So still, SVCE already has a contractor training and has a list of approved contractors who know how to do this.
Okay.
It's out there. It's on their website under that image I showed you. It says find a contractor in the list.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, so any other questions, discussions? Okay, can we move on to the final item 6, thank you. Okay, that is electric vehicle charger, the study providing a prioritized list of locations.
And we have two representatives here from Zero Quest. Charles is online. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourselves, I can pull up your PowerPoint.
Good, Chuck. Chuck, you're on mute.
Can you hear
No.
us, Charles?
We can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm Chuck Trolka, and as Victoria mentioned, my business partner Nazim is there in person. I had planned to be there in person, but some unforeseen circumstances came about, so I'm presenting remotely. Uh, I'll just start by saying one of the great benefits of being the last presenter is that people tend to be anxious to go home, and so it usually goes more quickly, the last presentation. So we'll see how things go today. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Victoria, if you could go to the next slide. So I just wanted to set some objectives. We're not going to review the full study. That's actually available to everybody to read, and I think has probably been previously distributed. What we want to accomplish today is to just talk about the basic approach we took, the flow of the information that we're providing, and the content. And then at the end, we'd like to talk about some next steps relative to implementation of the recommendations. Next slide. Specifically, the action item that we were given to address is TR 3.1 from the Climate Action Plan version 2.0, which is to conduct a survey of existing publicly accessible vehicle chargers, identify a prioritized list of locations for new vehicle charging stations, and provide that list considering an equitable distribution of chargers across multiple populations of the city. And so we'll get into that a little bit during the presentation. And then I would say a secondary parallel objective was not to complete action item TR 3.2, but really to lay the groundwork for it. And that action item had identified a target of 719 new publicly accessible level 2 and 3 chargers. And so we kept in mind that second objective, and you'll see our final recommendations come pretty close to that number. Next slide. I won't go through this in detail. It's just the outline of the study. We provide some background and context information relative to EVs and the Climate Action Plan. We talk about the methodology that we go through, and then really the bulk of the information is in section 5, the results and recommendations. And I'm going to present a brief summary from section 6 in the presentation today. Next slide. So I think people are aware that there's been a pretty significant shift towards electric vehicles. About 26% of new vehicles sold in Cupertino or to Cupertino residents in 2024 were electric. And that, as of the end of calendar Q3, equated to about 24,000 EV and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in the city of Cupertino. And of course, that's driven by tax and rebate incentives, the fact that there's a tech-savvy population. EVs are becoming more available and more affordable, and the state has a mandate to get to 100% sales. So we're roughly a quarter of the sales today are electric, but the goal is to get to 100% by 2035, which is only 10 years away. So that transition will happen fairly quickly. Next slide. We worked with Victoria and her team to prioritize list of potential EV charging sites according to various criteria. The number one priority locations were grant eligible or tax credit eligible locations, for the obvious reason that, you know, anytime there's money available, it makes it easier to get something done. We'll talk in a little bit more detail in a future slide about the NEVI program, given some of the administration changes at the federal level. Our priority 2 was accessible to the general public, which is generally desirable locations on, could be city, county, or state, But since we're doing this for the city, the priority, of course, is on city-owned sites. Priority 3 was what we called private sites, private property, but accessible to the general public. So these would be things like shopping centers, restaurants, and so hotels. Category 4 or priority 4 was privately owned sites that are not accessible to the public. So this is primarily employment locations. And then priority 5 is ensuring that we're meeting the needs of a variety of different communities. And these could be age related, it could be income related, physical capabilities, and also multifamily. And then the last one, Cal Enviro screen, is a kind of a combination of pollution and income levels. And so we'll talk about each of these categories briefly in the presentation today. All right, so we started by looking at the location of existing chargers, which was part of the scope of this report. I've got to give a lot of credit to Nazim for developing some really nice mapping tools that sit on top of Google Maps that allowed us to import data, in this case, locations of existing chargers, which, with the exception maybe of some employment locations, was generally publicly available. And then drop that right into the map so you can see level 2 charging stations, of course, are more numerous. That's typically 240 volt, relatively slow charging on the order of tens of miles per hour of charging. And then level 3, also known as fast DC charging. This is much quicker charging on the order of 10 minutes to 30 minutes and at much higher voltage and current levels. One of the things you'll see, in addition to the fact that naturally there are more level 2 charging stations, primarily because they're much cheaper to install and maintain. You'll see that, but you'll also see that the locations of the chargers in the city tend to fall along 2 horizontal axes, the 280 corridor at the top, and then Stevens Creek Boulevard kind of running through the middle of the slide. So part of what we looked at, in addition to the priorities that we saw earlier, was ensuring that we got a reasonable geographic distribution of charger locations. And so hopefully you'll see that as we go through. Next slide, please. For each of the maps that we provided, we also provided the same data in tabular form so that you could see specific addresses, for example. And in the tables, it's a lot easier to see the number of chargers and also the number of level 2 versus level 3 chargers. So we tried to provide that data. This is a snapshot of the table for existing chargers, but it's only a partial snapshot. It actually continues on. It's a fairly large table with a lot of good detail. And yep, thanks. So our priority 1, if you'll recall, was this had 2 categories: NEVI program formula and the IRS 1030C tax credit. NEVI program is a federal program for fast DC charging along major corridors, of which 280 is one. And so we looked at, and there are certain requirements for the chargers to be located within a limited distance of the corridor in question. Again, in this case, 280. We identified multiple locations where we felt that there was both room for the chargers. We also checked to ensure that there was a level of PG&E service available to support the high voltage requirements of the fast chargers, and also ensuring that we meet the NEVI program requirements. Unfortunately, at this time, it looks like with the new administration, the NEVI program has been put on hold. Any previous grants that were already extended are expected to be honored. But the program is not currently issuing new grants. That could change or possibly with the new administration. So I think you'll see at the end, we talk about just the need to continue to monitor the status of this program. But if and when the program comes back, we have a good set of locations to put those chargers. Next slide, please. And this is the tabular summary of that same data. So about 88 fast chargers that we would recommend total through that program. And then the second part of priority one was the IRS 30C tax credit. As far as we know, this program is still being supported. It's really intended to support lower income areas and also less populated areas. And so you'll see two categories. In the city of Cupertino, there's actually very little area that's covered, I'll say within the city proper. There's that little tan area north of Homestead, and we found one apartment complex that's within the city that could potentially apply for that program and receive support. By the way, the IRS 30C tax credit applies to private entities that are filing tax returns but want to take advantage of installing chargers. And then, so there's that one apartment complex in the tan area, and then the rest is primarily very low population area on the green, shown on the green on the left-hand side of the slide. We're not really recommending putting any chargers in those locations. Next slide. And so the priority two locations, we identified these as city, county, or state. And so we did, for example, include schools, and we included county parks, but really our primary focus here was on city-owned parks. And one of the advantages of putting chargers in these locations is often they can be level 2 chargers, so they're much less expensive to install. And you see, if you do put them in parks or other city-owned properties, then this is one way of addressing that issue of getting a good geographic distribution of chargers so that nobody has to drive very far if they wanted to charge their vehicle. And then priority 3 was publicly accessible but privately owned locations. So again, shopping centers and hotels and restaurants. And so I think the icons are pretty straightforward for those. And you can see coffee shops and also places of worship. So part of what the city could do is encourage each of these private locations to pursue mostly level 2 charging, occasionally level 3 charging, as a way to, number one, support the city cap plan, and number two, to encourage people who have EVs to attend those establishments and give them business. Next slide, please. Priority 4 is privately accessible and privately owned sites. And these are primarily employers. So you could argue about whether some employers may want to make their sites available to the public. In the case of Apple, for example, they actually do that at their visitor center for the headquarters location. We believe that most employers are not going to want to do that. However, we also believe that employers are incentivized to support EV charging for their employees again, a quarter of whom probably are already driving EVs. And unfortunately, the data for those locations is difficult to come by. Cupertino, as everybody knows, has one gigantic employer, Apple. They have kind of a very large company, but really I'll call it a second tier employer for Cupertino, and that's Amazon. And then there's kind of everybody else. So this would take a greater effort to make that encouragement, but we have seen other employers, and Nazim and I, in working with some of our previous employers, have had that experience of encouraging EV charging and having had some success with it. So we do think there's a lot of opportunity here, but it probably will take some work. And then priority 5 is equity priority communities and all these other categories that we saw, which include things like, again, income levels, physical ability levels, and so forth. So if we start with income, there's not really good data for that within the city of Cupertino. The closest proxy we could find was this thing called the Association of Bay Area Governments Equity Priority Communities. So these are communities that the Bay Area Commission has identified as being underserved or lower income. And again, you might see that little purple square above 280. That's actually right above Homestead. It's the same location that was identified as a target for the IRS 30C location, and probably for the same reason. So, so there's overlap in that sense, and the overlap really, the opportunity there is a single apartment complex, which we've identified in our report. Next slide. We also identified senior living and multifamily locations throughout the city, and looked at how much space, how much parking space each of these sites has available, and made recommendations for a number of chargers for these sites. A benefit of encouraging charging at senior living and multifamily, not only do you get a good geographic distribution, as you can see from the map, but also typically these chargers can be level 2 because people are charging overnight while they sleep. And so the cost of installation can be significantly less than the fast charging. So, so good geographic distribution and typically lower cost. And you get the added benefit of charging at home convenience, which Nazim and I are both EV charging or EV owners, and we both charge at home. And so we really appreciate the fact that you can do that. And once you have that benefit, you'll realize that it's actually more convenient to charge an EV than it is to gas up a non-EV vehicle, because you don't have to take it anywhere. You drive it home, plug it in, and you wake up in the morning and it's ready to go again. Next slide. So the last, that really covers the category 5s. The very last priority 5 item was this Cal Enviro screen, which again is a combination of environmental and income, kind of an intersection of those two things. The group that provides this data, which is a state-sponsored group, ranks each area in the state according to a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 being areas with the highest need and 0 being the areas with the lowest need. Cupertino, not too surprisingly, falls either into the lowest or the next to lowest need category. So none of these meet the screening requirement area for EV charging prioritization, but we included the data for completeness. Next slide. So this is a summary of our results. I won't go through it line by line. On the left-hand side is the category that, and we've talked about most of those during the presentation. We've listed the priority according to Victoria and her team. And then whether we're recommending any particular number of level 2 or level 3 chargers for locations within those categories. And then at the bottom, we summarize the number of level 2 and the number of level 3 chargers. So we came up with recommendations for 518 level 2 chargers and 162 level 3 chargers. If you add those together, they're slightly below the 719 target, which we weren't a part of determining that number and don't really have the data for how that was decided. But it is, I think, reasonably close to that number and maybe even exceeds that number if you consider the fact that a number of chargers have likely been added within the city since that 719 figure was derived. So, and we've also looked at the ratio of level 2 to level 3 chargers and whether that's a reasonable ratio given what other cities have done and the existing ratio of chargers and also future needs going forward. And we believe that that's a reasonable number. So I think we're pretty comfortable with the locations, the numbers, and the level 2 versus level 3 numbers. Next slide. So that brings us to the discussion topics. We're recommending, we have 5 possible things that could be done by the city or by the Sustainability Council going forward. The first thing that we recommend is to track the status of the NEVI program, and if and when new grants become available, then there should be somebody tasked with coordinating the application of grants for the city. The second one is that IRS 30C credit area, which you'll recall also was an overlap with one of the lower income areas. And there's one apartment complex, it's the Forge Homestead Apartments that's located in that part of the city. There's a potential for them to add EV charging and get this IRS 30C tax credit. There's also PG&E has a program for multi-housing EV charging, and that's a grant program for installation of level 2 chargers. So there's the potential for that location to qualify for the PG&E program, potentially the PG&E program and or the IRS 30C tax credit. So that would seem to be a high priority. Number 3, California Energy Commission, Center for Sustainable Energy, has a program that they've kind of activated and deactivated over time. It's called the Cal EVIP program. It's the current incarnation is 2.0. And 2.0 is focused on fast DC, which is the level 3 charging sites. And it's a grant program. So we would recommend pursuing grants for the fast DC charging. They also turn out to have some of their previous program, which was focused on level 2 and called their 1.0 program. So there is still some of that money available, and it's possible that the city could pursue that for some of the level 2 charger locations. Our fourth recommendation is to determine a funding strategy for chargers on city-owned sites. We know that there is already some activity as discussed earlier in this meeting today, but there are many other opportunities to add level 2 charging on city-owned sites. And, but of course, that work has to be funded. And I believe one of the commissioners brought up the very good point of the cost of maintenance, which we do believe should be going down as EV charging becomes much more common and commoditized. However, it is a cost consideration that should be included. And then item number 5 is to develop a program to encourage the installation of chargers on private property. Would include workplaces, which was our priority 4, and retail establishments, hotels and apartment buildings, which is a mix of priority 3 and priority 4. So these are the actions that we would recommend. We'd like to open at this point the topics for discussion and give people the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. I realize a lot of data in a short period of time.
Okay, well, commissioners, are there any questions?
I would go with this, skip, I would wait for the discussion.
Discussion, okay.
One quick clarifying question, and this is not me picking at the methodology at all, it's more like me being curious. Does the Cal Enviro Screen 4.0 account for SB 535, but also the AB 15 components when it comes to calculating like disadvantaged communities based on environmental pollution?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. I could maybe explain a little bit more about that and then see if I answer the question. So the Cal Enviro screen looks, I believe, at primarily at air pollution and also income levels. So I believe what that program is intended to do is address air quality for lower income areas. And for example, we know that lower income housing tends to be located more towards major transportation corridors. We know that the city of Oakland has an issue with lower income residents being affected by traffic from the port, from trucking traffic, moving goods from the port. So I believe that those are the kinds of issues that the Cal Enviro screen was intended to address. And because Cupertino tends to not have many low-income residents, and because there's not kind of these special circumstances like a port with a lot of diesel traffic, or a diesel train corridor, or even necessarily a lot of diesel truck traffic on 280. It's that combination of factors that made Cupertino not a target location for that particular program.
And thank you so much. The reason why I asked that question is, so I started my local government career in sustainability. And when I started, Cal Enviro Screen 3.0 was just introduced. And when you look at Cal Enviro Screen 3.0, there are some communities that Cal Enviro Screen doesn't categorize as disadvantaged. But when you look at SB 535 or AB 1550, then those communities are actually disadvantaged. So where I'm getting at is I want to make sure that, Cupertino being a very privileged and, high income community, I want to make sure that the methodology does not leave out any parts of census tracts that are actually environmentally disadvantaged. But I mean, it's a very well done methodology. It's more of like, yeah, I was just curious.
Okay. Any other questions? Did you want to say something?
Only that that's certainly something that we can just go back and take a quick look at to ensure that we didn't miss anything there.
I did have a question because when I saw that green and you see a freeway running right through Cupertino, it sort of surprised me that those areas on either side of the freeway we're still green, even though you had those emissions? Like, has Cupertino, because of its focus, put itself in green because we've been doing work that way? Or is it some other factor that has made us green by the map that was laid
It
out?
could be relative. I mean, basically, getting pollution from the freeway, but relative to being next, in 280 versus 17,
I don't know, we have a lot of green space up against the hills, right? And that was always green space, that was supposed to be green space, and my mother-in-law built right up against that. And they said they weren't gonna build up in the hills, and as soon as that 25-year window went, that whole hill got covered, right? Up against the mountains up here, but, you know, I think there's been a huge sustainability focus in Cupertino because of who we are as a community from the get-go. But again, I hate to have us be discriminated against because, and I know that we're not in a space where we have to worry about being marginalized by where we're built, but still, we have a freeway running through our community. So, anyway, thank you. Discussion?
Discussion for me is the privately owned, publicly accessible areas. I own a EV, pure EV, and level 2 is not going to cut it for a restaurant. Level 3 would. And so for making it attractive for people to stop, level 2s are not coming and having a dinner. Level 2, my mind, is not an incentive. What it would do is it would cause people to park the car, take up a valuable parking spot. Now, I'm not talking about Walmart, which will go have us in an area which they're charging everything like that, but regular restaurant is not going to want to, in my mind, use up parking spots for people who are not really, spending this 10 hours or 9 hours it takes to charge the car to be shopping at. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is something that we have looked at. Yeah, I totally agree. Level 2 charger, you really require, let's say, 4+ hours.
Yeah.
But there are places, in our recommendations, we have level 3 chargers in shopping centers, just like today Target has it and things like that.
Yeah.
But there is a cost problem, which is level 3 chargers are significantly much more expensive than level 2. So even if you're not doing a full charge, let's say you're doing, you want 30 miles or 20 miles of range that you want to do in a restaurant and you're there for a couple hours, you're going to get that. So that's why we try to weigh the cost versus where we put the level of charge.
So I guess, and my counter argument for that. And by the way, having it for the apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And all those other things. I'm
Yeah.
all for it.
Totally
The
agree.
only part of all this thing is you're gonna find that people are just parking the car there.
Yeah, so if we can, this comes down to affordability. I totally agree. If you can get a level 3 charger in a restaurant area, that's the ideal situation. But sometimes you have to make compromises just from an economics point of view.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how are you going to get the owners, if I'm an owner of the small business, maybe like a restaurant or whatever. I'm very hesitant to have a.
Yeah, so we're not trying to pick, if you look at the location, it's more like shopping centers that have restaurants and grocery stores and other stuff. Think of, various shopping centers,
Okay,
Balco and stuff like that, not a single restaurant. I agree with you, they're not.
okay.
Yeah.
That's where I was.
Yeah. One other thing that I'd like to point out is that these are all private property locations and really none of us can dictate or at least are trying to dictate what a particular owner should or shouldn't do. We made some baseline recommendations But I really think in the case of private property, it's up to the property owner and they've got to make these trade-offs. Do I, want to take the chance on somebody parking for a long time? Do I want to pay for a fast charger? Do I want to make a deal with a third-party company to install fast chargers with some kind of revenue sharing agreement? So again, we're providing general guidelines, but we're certainly not dictating anything. And really, ultimately, the private property owners should make that decision.
How much is a level 2 charger compared to a level 3? Significant, what does that mean?
Yeah, so go ahead, Nazim.
Good.
Yeah, we don't have specific numbers, but to give you an order of magnitude sense, level 2 charging is typically a thousands of dollars type proposition, and level 3 charging is a tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands depending on the size. So it's at least an order of magnitude more expensive.
And that's assuming PG&E has the ability to do that. PG&E, if you have to put a new line for a level 3 charger, then it's prohibitively expensive.
That's right. The city is ready for level 2 charging almost everywhere. Level 3 charging often requires particular PG&E upgrades, which is a whole other consideration in addition to the cost.
I mean, I really love all the recommendations that are provided, especially the 5th one. I think that is a giant endeavor in terms of trying to connect with, even multifamily property owners. I tried that in my prior job. It was very, very hard. But I wonder if there are programs at the Bay Area brands like the regional energy networks that are able to, assist city staff to do something like this. But I know that a lot of the multifamily property owners are probably not, they are probably investors and developers from all around the country. So I know that that's going to be a hiccup in terms of the outreach.
Yep. Yeah, and the other challenge, I think that's a very good point. And the other challenge is that there's really no one person who has been tasked to do any of these things. So I guess if there's an overarching recommendation, it would be to find somebody to take on all or part of the responsibility for pursuing these recommendations, because without that, probably none of these things are going to happen.
Question for the group. As there, discussion questions and ideas in front of us, if you could wave a magic wand and make one of them happen, which one would you want to see happen?
Oh, wand?
Just one.
I would go with the apartment.
Okay. But
Everybody, every unit has its own charter.
you mean number 5
Um,
or number 2? Okay.
Well, number 2 is a specific one apartment complex where it's effectively low income housing, and that's a low hanging fruit.
yeah, that's low hanging, but I would think, if I had a wand, talking wands, it would consider it very difficult. Every apartment would.
Yeah, and apartments have the lowest penetration of EV chargers today.
Today.
Yeah.
But there's a good reason for that. And then,
There's no motivation for the apartment owner to put it.
yeah,
Except for number 2 is free, right? He's gonna get a grant.
Yeah. Well,
You can put it in.
so anyway, that was the one.
Yeah, nice.
That was not any.
and it's also cheaper because you can put a level 2 charger as opposed to a level 3 in an apartment.
Yeah, I mean, basically. It's beneficial to the apartment owner to be able to incentivize, it's a, when there's a, let's say, open unit, I know in Cupertino, open units don't last very long. but you could charge a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And suddenly, if I'm there in that apartment and there's a charging thing, now my option of buying an electric car becomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you did 5, doesn't that encompass everything? Because you have a program now, so you have to do 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Well, you certainly could pick number 5 and then pick and choose within there what you wanted to focus on first. But I would agree with Nazim. Apartment buildings, for me on this list, would be a relatively high priority if you can make it happen. I think that, retail and hotels were seeing that happen organically but slowly. So the opportunity there is to really accelerate that adoption. But for apartment buildings, I agree. I think that's big opportunity, but very challenging to convince those owners to do it. But it's important, and it really would encourage EV adoption.
Is it in our muni code already that new residential developments need to block off X amounts of like parking spaces for chargers?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's part of the building code.
Unfortunately, there's not that many new apartment buildings coming up in Cupertino.
Wish there were.
No, I mean, basically, we need to have we need to have. Well, as I have grown a little bit older, I have found that my arguments persuade people are much sweeter if I tell them how much money they're gonna save. And that's how I believe the city should be presenting this package of, you do this, this is the benefit, this is really what's gonna come back in X amount of years.
So you got your answer to your question?
Yes,
Okay,
unless you have anything to add.
thank you. Is there any more discussion?
I would like to go on the record and say Chuck and Nazim have been a very great pleasure to work with and to extend my gratitude. Nazim is a resident and Chuck is in Santa Clara, and they found us and volunteered to do this study.
Oh,
Thank
wow.
you so.
So they have worked with us for almost 6 months now and trying to make this come to fruition. And to quote them, they said they won't be happy until something happens and comes of their study. So I appreciate their efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We care about the climate.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wow.
How generous. Okay,
Thank you both.
Thank you, Chuck.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so finally, we're on the future agenda setting portion of the agenda. Does any member of the commission wish to add or remove an item from the list?
Let me pull up the list. Second. Okay. I'll just speak to a couple of these real quick. Opportunities and challenges of recycled water. I have on my to-do list to resend the recycled water feasibility study that I think was published in February. We can keep that on if you have questions or want to discuss it, but it wouldn't lead to a recommended action or further
I
action.
mean, we kind of touched on it when we talked about Blackberry Farm, right?
So if you wanted to vote to remove it, we can bring it and talk about it, but it's up to you all. And then the landfill agreement, that is going to council already, hopefully in the next month-ish. So I don't know if you want that to come back.
That you have stuff sorted.
Correct. Yes. We have tentatively put on deck for next meeting the presentation on recycling and what other jurisdictions do. So we wanted to keep that on, and I know businesses are an ongoing topic. In schools, absolutely. So if you need to vote to remove the first two, it needs two people to agree. You can leave them on here, or you can add other things if 2 people agree.
To agree to what?
To adding an item. So you can suggest something that you want to talk about in a future meeting,
You said the first two items.
any of the items, if you want to remove or add anything, it needs two of you to agree to add or
I said two, and I
remove.
was fixated on this.
Sorry.
The first two awards, right?
Well, the first one, we already talked about water recycling during this meeting, right? It's $50 million to get it up
Well,
to here.
In my view, I would like first one to go into, let's talk about this down the road. Because, and down the road is probably a couple of years, because the infrastructure is gonna get closer to us slowly but surely. Right now, it's too far away.
Sunnyvale.
Is that reasonable? Okay, but if they have it just go, thrown away is not what we want.
So you would like to remove it? Would anybody else like to?
I think
remove it?
he's
I think-
suggesting to keep it before the long term.
Yeah,
Yeah, at that point, I would recommend removing it for now, since these are our short-term presentations that we're gonna bring back to you of what's concerned right now, but in your 4-year term, you can vote to put it back on.
yeah.
Is that okay? We can leave it on here too.
No,
I'm trying to prioritize what you all want.
I understand.
Yeah.
And my world, I wouldn't have a little solid area, I'd have I'd have.
Okay. We'll move it down the list. How does that sound?
It's pending for 3 years. And the landfill agreement, Ursula's already got that going before council, right? So we don't need an update, correct? Okay,
All right, yeah.
we can move that one. So who do I have agreed on removing that?
Oh, yeah,
You and I, Susan and Alex,
Okay.
and then postponing the challenge of recycled water.
That's about the same, that's the same thing right now, it's too expensive.
I put it on for 2027, 28.
Okay, that's good, I like that. Okay, Jack agrees, and anybody else?
Is there anything you want to add?
I'm too new.
I'm thinking about the electrification stuff. I mean, that was a lot of interest, and when you said which thing would you like to look at? Item number 5 was actually, getting a program that might help people figure out what to do. That was like an overarching, right? The prioritization of item number, you said pick an item on that list.
Oh, for EV chargers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
To dive into one of those to see how we can expand a program.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm looking for the slide, but I don't see it on here.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in the packet because that's just the report. The slides are posted by the end of the day.
Yeah, so the item number 5 on that slide was, to me, it seemed kind of interesting. But I don't know if I'm just adding more work for people.
Well, these are just. When I was in the bicycle commission, we had a whole list. I mean, and it's you don't necessarily hit them there. In fact, some of the stuff you don't hit for a long while, but they're in your back of your mind. Like one thing that I would like up there, but I'm afraid I don't know how you guys are doing things, are the swells for they're called swells for swales. Sorry. Well, our streets, site, we have way too much concrete and other stuff. We need to be captured in that, and also programs for sequestering water for, at least residential, whatever. I mean, there's lots of different things there, but we'll be getting that later on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, but if we list stuff, you might have stuff that's just like a higher priority that you are going to be talking about. There's other stuff that's going to come up over and over, and then at some point you have the breaking point of like, no, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a list of interested items and then rank by priorities.
How about this? Why don't we put up an item that the commissioners generate a list of personal interest items or items that we think should be on the city list?
That would be cool.
I like that. I also recommend pulling from our climate action plan and just pulling out items that you want to prioritize from that discussion.
Maybe we can make that an agenda item for next meeting.
You want me to present the climate action plan?
Oh,
No,
no, no,
and
no,
then,
like-
please no.
It would be a future agenda item setting for you all to discuss your priorities, so it's kind of already
Okay.
on the agenda. It's not something you would ask questions about, or
120-something pages.
it's a bit of.
It's on my, it was after finishing this 90-something page thing. It's my next thing that I have to do. It's like, I'm going like, oh.
You have 3 months.
No, I can't say that because it'll be,
You only have to
it'll
read
be
like
40
pages a
before the
day.
meeting and that I haven't done.
I did just tentatively write this one, per what I thought Commissioner Hanson, or sorry, Chair Hanson was saying. Is that accurate? And is there a second for it?
Could you read it?
Brainstorm what an EV charger program could look like to support multifamily. Oh,
I'm asking you because my vision is not what it is.
is that accurately worded for you?
That sounds fun. Yes, that's,
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so that's future, that's future item, future agenda. Okay. Can I adjourn the meeting?
You may adjourn the meeting.
All right, it is now 6:38 and I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.